Hey everyone, welcome back to this channel. Is a new installment of Inspiration Information, a series that I do on and off about either a book, a podcast, a documentary that sort of spurred my interest into digging into a specific style of music or era or genre. Anything that was a source of inspiration that got me to dig back into my shelves and go deep. And today I want to mention this wonderful book, Electric Eden, by Rob Young, who's a journalist for The Wire. And this was published, I think, initially in 2010. So it's not a new book, it's a book that's been around for quite a while. I bought it a couple of years ago, was on my shelf, and I've decided to bite the bullet and read it. It's 600 pages long, so it demands some form of concentration because the information, each page is loaded with very rich content, and it starts off obviously with the days of folk song collecting. It talks about characters like Cecil Sharp, for example, who is mentioned in this book multiple times. Cecil Sharp was late 19th century, early 20th century folk song collector. He collected more than 4,000 songs and travelled from England to Australia to the United States, and is widely credited to be the originator of the tradition that ensued in the 1970s. Him and Alan Lomax, who is well-known ethnomusicologist, who discovered, amongst other people, Mississippi Fred McDowell, but not just, travelled extensively through the United States, recorded blues, folk, country, and then came to England and introduced the Seegers to Ewan MacColl, for example. And Peggy Seeger got married to Ewan MacColl as a result of being introduced by Alan Lomax, it's an interesting turning point in this book. The fact that really the revival of British folk music in the 1970s is credited to Alan Lomax, an American guy, introducing an American family to British folk musicians, and this transatlantic alliance spurred a whole lot of creativity, and it's really, really interesting when you read into it. And characters like Shirley and Dolly Collins being also central to this. It's very hard to know where to start to make a video like this because I just want to show you some really great British folk records, and I've got a ton of them. This will be a long video, but I think it is interesting all the same, and it's worth mentioning a few records that just really, to me, mind-blowing. When you zoom in into a genre like this and you become really accustomed to the rules and the codes of, and you absorb them in a more sort of sustained manner, you discover these jewels, so to speak, just unfold before your very eyes. It's and so to talk about this, I thought maybe I'd divide this into 4 or 5 different segments. And the first one I want to call the heavyweights. Okay, so everyone probably knows about Fairport Convention and Pentangle. I'll still show some of those records. But for me, a real turning point is this album here, Folk Roots, New Routes, 1965, Shirley Collins and Davy Graham, which for me is an absolute masterpiece and a meeting of 2 really influential figures, and what spurred the British folk rock scene and beyond. Shirley Collins, she was the girlfriend of Alan Lomax for a while, and he took her to America, southern states of America, in 1956 or 57, and a mind was blown, and she came back filled with ideas and a changed attitude to the whole folk music scene. She has a very, because she's still alive. Dolly Collins died a few years ago, but she's still with us. She has this very high register when she sings. It's almost childlike, but at the same time, has a very sort of commending presence at the microphone. And we have Davy Graham, who is, in my opinion, the greatest British folk guitarist ever. And a man that everybody copied just about, from Bert, Jansch to, later people like Jimmy Page absorbed that style. He was born in an English family and became very early on fascinated with the sound of the bouzouki and the oud, and consequently travelled to places like Morocco, where he learned how to jam with local Moroccan musicians of tuning his guitar, and basically invented this DAG, DAG. No, it's Dagdad, isn't it? And I should know because I play the guitar. Tuning, which was then used by people like Bert Jansch and people like Jimmy Page and so on. But he was very secretive about it. He would play with his back to the audience when he was retuning his guitar, so in folk clubs, so he didn't want people to know how he was playing the songs. But this record, which is a collection of traditional tunes played with gusto and absolute vision by Davy Graham, is to me the foundation stone of what was to go beyond. And I would also include this album here, which I don't have on record, but the CD is a wonderful edition. It's called Folk, Blues and Beyond, which is, to me, it is the handbook of British guitar, no less. It's got this amazing version of Moaning by Art Blakey, which he plays on guitar and kind of scats to. It's just amazing. Things like Sally, Free and Easy, an absolute classic of the folk rock repertoire, and Angie, obviously, which is much covered and a really, really amazing piece of guitar playing. Very, very hard to master on the guitar, and a real stalwart of so. But effectively, these are kind of foundation stone. I have to mention, obviously, the great Fairport Convention, and I don't want to, because the video would last a very, very long time if I talked in depth about all these things. The first record with Judy Dybel and Ian Matthews, amongst others, is a nice record, but the Fairport, the classic Fairport, the 1969 treble starts with this record, which what we did on the holidays, which is a collection of covers and traditional songs like Nottingham Town, for example. The highlight, though, is Meet on the Ledge, the Richard Thompson original. And by that point, Judy Dybel had been replaced by the mercurial Sandy Denny, who to me is the greatest voice of. I can't, like, everything she sings on is just magical to me. When there's this Joe Boyd Witch Season Productions, and we have a much fully formed version of Fairport Convention. This continues there's interesting little backstory that I didn't know. I was reading the book, but this is Sandy Denny's house in Wimbledon in London. Fairport Convention are there at the back, and that's her parents, who are very stern looking and very I think they were army folk from memory, and very sad because both of their kids died before them. Sandy Denny very, very young in 1978, fell off the stairs, and I mean, really. So on this, you still have Martyn Lemble on drums, and you have the introduction of Dave Swarbrick, who would become on this record a real, stalwart of the sound, but because Martyn Lemble died in the car accident, very well documented, he was replaced by the greatest drummer of that time period, full stop, Dave Mattacks, who has a driving kind of almost funky sound on this. It's really, if you listen to Matty Groves, it's like a funk tune almost. So they retreated to a place called Farley. I can't remember that. It's a house in the country, and it's even got. I was talking about Cecil Sharp at the start, but there's even got a dedication at the back. The things that you don't understand when you don't read books. Produced by Joe Boyd, with a special thanks to the English Folk Dance and Song Society Library at Cecil Sharp House. Cecil Sharp House. There. So there you go. He was very, very central to this whole British folk revival. Originally released on Ireland in 1969, it is. Look, when you read in the book, it says that there was a lot of inspiration drawn from music from Big Pink, and this is, effectively the British version of music from Big Pink. Music from Big Pink, very, very hard to say, isn't it? Is fundamentally a key record in the country rock, roots rock evolution in America. It's just really, really important, and this is its straight equivalent. Obviously, I have to talk a little bit about the outliers. I mean, if you've listened to these three records, I think Angel Delight is quite wonderful too. It's worth investigating. Still features Mattacks and Simon Nicholl, and it's post departure of arguably the driving force of Fairport Convention, who was Ashley Hutchings, who then went on to form this band, Still I Span, with Maddie Pryor and Tim Hart. They stayed together in a tiny village called Winterbourne Stoke, which is just on the edge of Stonehenge. And it's an interesting location because Stonehenge is imbued in that kind of mystique of pagan folk and legends that hark back to times of Celtic times, and you've got this real mythology that is associated with British folk rock. Dave Mattacks again drumming on this, Ashley Hutchings on bass, Maddie Pryor on vocals. Maddie Pryor is also, I think, not quite to the level of Sandy Denny for me, but an absolute genius. So Hark, The Village Wait is probably their masterpiece, but I would draw you to this wonderful record, which you can have for $1 if you want. It's a very cheap record. You can still buy this for $3, $4, $5, which is a later effort. It's post Ashley Hutchings, and it's got this thing called Gaudetti, which is that's the second song on side 2, which is basically a Christmas Latin Mass sang a cappella, which actually charted in England back in the day, in 1972. Just a Mass in Latin. There you go. Gaudetti Christus es natus. Yeah, all that. A wonderful album, a wonderful kind of medieval folk rock. Just a sublime piece of music. Now, obviously, I was talking about Fairport, Richard Thompson. I mean, must mention the lowest selling record ever on whatever label it came on at the time. It starts with this song called "Roll Over Vaughan Williams," and I have to mention Vaughan Williams and John Ireland and Delius and Elgar and these early 20th century composers who took the folk tradition and turned it into classical music. Like if you've never heard Vaughan Williams doing Greensleeves, for example, but there's your answer. So Roll Over Vaughan Williams is clearly a tribute to that to those early stalwarts of the of folk music in England. We have again a supercast: Sandy Denny, Linda Peters, who was to become Linda Thompson later on. You've got John Kirkpatrick. You've got Ashley Hutchings on vocals, and the great Barry Dransfield, which I'm going to talk about right now. Barry Dransfield, I was just listening to his record just 5 minutes ago. He's a very under the radar folk rock record. He's a fiddle player, Barry Dransfield. He is notable for his appearance on the Morris On records, which again is basically the Richard Thompson solo album, basically a solo debut album, the same lineup exactly. And this comes back to Cecil Sharp. Cecil Sharp is responsible for the revival or the maintaining of the Morris dancing in England, which is a really, really important cultural tradition. This album is, filled with basically Morris dancing classics, from Greensleeves to Cuckoo's Nest to, it's probably more, this is more trad than anything else I'm showing you right now. But it's kind of also very important in understanding the whole thing. Coming back to Barry Dransfield, this is so well arranged and his voice is so well suited to the songs. Starts with The Werewolf, which is a Michael Hurley classic, but I feel like this is almost like a Nick Drake, sort of a record. One of these buried classics. Came out in 1973 or 2 or something like that. Beautiful record. And whilst I'm in the Fairport Convention family, I do have to mention these records. Okay, this is a masterpiece for me. Ian Matthews, If You Saw Through My Eyes, he was in the very early version of Fairport Convention. He's a wonderful singer. This record is very, very easily obtainable. To me, it's one of the buried gems of that British folk rock. I can't recommend you a record any higher than this, really. And I got to talk about Sandy Denny, obviously. Obviously, after she left Fairport, after those 3 wonderful records, she formed Fotheringay with her boyfriend Trevor Lucas, who was far less talented than she was and a bit of a control freak and not a very nice person by the sounds of it. But there they are in full flight. Fotheringay, named after the castle in which Mary, Queen of the Scots, was detained. And this, to me, is arguably some of the best work that Sandy Denny ever did, notably the great Banks of the Nile, which is the very last song, which is a traditional song. To me, it's the finest of the finest. It's up there with, I'd say, A Sailor's Life, and Who Knows Where the Time Goes. These are the best of the best performances that she ever recorded. And to me, Banks of the Nile, every time I hear it, it just gives me shivers. She's to me like a Nina Simone of the British, like she's got this commanding presence. Her solo records were wonderful too. the North Star, Grassman and the Ravens. The title track on this is just superb as well. But not just. Blackwater Side, beautiful song, late November. But yeah, it's all about the title track on this. Recorded or issued in 1974 or something, or thereabouts. Great cast of musicians, very highly recommended, and I would equally recommend you like an old-fashioned waltz, which is a bit more upbeat in terms of the musical content. It's got a bit more, it's more produced, more arranged, but the songs are all the same, beautiful. And it's got Dark the Night on this, and the title track, which is very much old-timey and has got this almost vaudevillian kind of sound to it, with Dave Mattacks again and Danny Thompson from Pentangle, and Alan Skidmore, the great British saxophonist. I mean, really beautiful stuff. Very highly recommended, and cheap. There's records that you can get for so cheap still. It's just a crime. Now, Pentangle were from London and comprised of 5 really idiosyncratic, amazing members, namely, there they are, singer Jackie McShee, 2 amazing guitar players, John Renbourn and Bert Jansch, and Denny Thompson on double bass, and Terry Cox, who, like Dave Mattacks, has got this really, really specific sound, very jazzy, and on the drums. And they're a jazz folk band, really. Like they're the epitome of folk jazz, very sort of cosmic, and their 5 albums are worth hearing. I mean, the debut album is lovely, and it's 6 albums. I don't think I pulled that Solomon's seal, but that doesn't matter. Their 6 studio albums are just really super sublime. I mean, I think if you're beginning with this, Basket of Light is clearly one that is so accessible and kind of, it's almost a pop album. This one, Light Flight, Sally Go Around the Roses, the Cuckoo again, Train Song. The Cuckoo appears on a lot of, it's a traditional song, it's played all over, fantastic. The amazing live, part studio, not Cruel Sister, Sweet Child, sorry, yes, absolutely, masterpiece. Cruel Sister, which is wonderful, with this stunning version of Jack Ryan, which I'll talk about Bert Jansch, but I don't know why at the moment the one that I come back to the most is this album, Reflection, which is post their big tour, which left them exhausted, and all the pictures of them on tour, and it's just a bit more, there's something a bit more jazzy, funky in there, a bit more, it's more playful than the usual. There's a song called Helping Hand on this, which I think is just totally spellbinding. There we go. Helping Hand is the first song on side 2. Recommended, highly recommended. Pentangle. This is an original pressing. You can still get these for super cheap. Like, these are just very, very, very under the radar records. Obviously, I mean, Jansch, the classic debut. I would look, some records I would definitely I mean, the best Jansch is probably Jack O'Ryan, and I was talking about that on, just like, this is Jansch at his most polished, his most bewitching, his most, his voice is on point. Likewise, this is a beautiful record, Bert and John, which was recorded in 1966, a bit earlier. But both of them are just really worth These are both from '66, but I think this one came out first, and this one came out just after. They're both amazing. I really love Birthday Blues. Don't know why. It's probably got a bit more of a mainstream appeal in terms of its, it's less. How should I say? It's a bit less folky than it's less in, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong. It's what I hear with it, with Wishing Well and Birthday Blues, and but Wishing Well and Poison also, classics of the catalogue, and the late period classic LA Turnaround, which is a fusion of American folk music and UK folk music, so it's less representative, but it's one of his best records, easily. Very beautiful stuff. And obviously John Renbourn, his records are wonderful. I love this. This is great. The Lady and the Unicorn. But Made in Bedlam is also worth hearing. But this is all instrumental, very medieval sounding, just almost classical like, Last heavyweight I would really quickly, briefly mention is the great John Martyn. I mean, if you're going to get one John Martyn record, I would say any day of the week, get Solidaire. I think it's the perfect record. I mean, it's just from start to finish insanely beautifully recorded. But I have also a soft spot for the two records that he did with his wife, Stormbringer, which is that both of them are such great examples of the best of UK folk rock. He was from Scotland, like Bert Jansch, like the Incredible String Band, like a lot of players came from Scotland. Both of these records, Root to Root, but I would say this, and it took me years to find, but the Live at Leeds, which is not a common record that you can find, was one that John Martyn sent out himself from his house. It's made to look like a bootleg. It's not, but it was released by Ireland officially, and it's a very limited edition. And it's kind of cool to think that John Martyn probably sent this record himself somewhere to someone who was a fan. And his 1977 album, which is no longer kind of a British folk rock, it becomes a sort of experimental piece, where he met Lee Scratch Perry, and he went to Jamaica, and is also super worth knowing. The second part of this will be dedicated to psychedelic folk musicians, and I'd like to start with the great Donovan, who is always sort of painted in a sort of a lighter kind of light, but I think if you're going to get one thing from Donovan, this record here is absolutely essential. A gift from a flower to the garden. It's 2 albums packaged as a 1 box set, and it's the best thing that Donovan ever did. It's playful, childlike, psychedelic, and just absolutely wholesome. From 1967, and went to obviously meet the Maharishi with the Beatles and all that, but this record is just stunning. I think in the same line, and very influential, the group founded by Clive Palmer, Robin Williamson and Mike Heron, from Edinburgh in Scotland, the Incredible String Band, with 2 or 3 records that I would highly recommend that fit really well in that box. The 5,000 layers or spirits of the layers of the onion, which is just joyful, psychedelic, mad to the bone kind of Chinese white painting box. The Hedgehog song, just really inventive, and they played with toy instruments. They were just really creative with very little, and likewise they're following 2 records absolutely essential. The Hangman's Beautiful Daughter. So there you go, Robin Williamson and Mike Herron, and their girlfriends, Licorice, whatever her name was, and what was her name? They had their girlfriends playing on this, and I think that caused a little bit of strife between them. This record and the amazing double LP, which was released as two single LPs in the US, but Wee Tam and the Big Huge. There you go, the two albums that they released as a double and two singles. That's just it. It's freaking mad. I think it's on the par with that Flower from To the Garden, in terms of like the creativity and in this category, I want to highlight some more psychedelic folksters. The great Meic Stevens, Welsh singer-songwriter, which he at times sounds a bit like Bob Dylan, but if Bob Dylan had this kind of psychedelic tinge to it, to his music, but in saying this, it's very accessible. We have a whole lot of, you've got the one Motia on sitar, who appeared also on jazz records. Really, really, really superb music. The band Trees. This is The Garden of Jane Delaunay, with the mercurial vocals of what's her name, the singer. She is absolutely she has this voice which is, I can't remember her name, but I know her name, if you will, but I can't remember it on top of my head now. This is, I think, the second album, which is the one that probably I like the best out of the two records. She became the voice of the Northern Line in London. The announcement that you were on the platform, that's her. Her name escapes me. And this record, which is freaking mad, Simon Finn, Pass the Distance, which is not mentioned in the book really, in his sort of, it's me adding this to the from the early 1970s. This is freak folk, completely tortured. In the same vein, I'd advise you to listen to Jerusalem on this one. In the same vein as this band here, which I've got everything they've ever recorded is on this double CD, Comus, and obviously First Utterance with its graphically challenged cover. Very, very dark, very, oh gosh, this is acid folk, freak folk of the greatest order. I mean, Glenn Goring, the guy who was what was his name? Yeah, Glenn. I think it was Glenn Goring, the guy who ran the group, who wrote the songs. Just like the vision. No, it was not Glenn Goring. What was his name? There they are. Okay. It's got some beautiful liner notes, and obviously I haven't read them very well. Roger Wooten and Glenn Goring, that's right. I think it was Roger Wooten that I was thinking of. And they had also two ladies singing there, which added to the sort of mystique to the whole thing. But they just, like, they sold fuck all records and just disappeared, basically. Okay, now a little bit of a segment which I'll call Baroque folk. Obviously, I mean, if I'm going to start somewhere, so Baroque folk, something that's that contains arrangements, folk-based, but with orchestral arrangements at times. Obviously, I mean, do I need to introduce Nick Drake? And here's a record nobody ever shows about Nick Drake. Is the record that came out much later, Magic, or Made to Love Magic, it's called. with his 3 or 4 songs that he recorded post those things, like Black Eyed Dog and Magic and Toadline, and some really amazing early versions of, Riverman and, Rider on the Wheel, or just like, if if you've never heard this is really worth getting. The other records, to me, they're just, forever records, kind of. So I'm not going to discuss them in great depth with you. You probably know about Nick Drake. Another key singer of that kind of, in that sort of time for me, is the great Bill Fay. So I've got quite a few of his albums, but I would highly recommend that you listen to Time of Last Persecution, because to me it's a folk rock classic. It's an absolute tour de force, with, it's him just at his best, really, especially on Omega Day and I Hear Your Calling, which is to me one of the greatest songs ever written. Dustfield Room, Till the Cries Come. Amazing folk rock kind of, and very, very, very beautifully arranged. I can only recommend. That's one of my all-time favorite records. The wonderful Bridget St John, which I have to. Songs for the Gentleman. If Nico could hold a tune, she would be. She can, but it very much is. The voice is. It's got echoes of like, people know Nico because she's probably more well known than this chick is. But honestly, this is an absolute, just lovely, well orchestrated, well arranged, and super well sung record. City Crazy is my favorite song on this, but like Early Morning Song and Seagull Sunday, just beautiful stuff. 1971 on Dandelion Records, which is John Peel's label. I was very astonished to find this original a few years ago at a record fair for like $20. I was kind of stoked. One that's completely under radar, Dave Evans. Sounds like Nick Drake, Bill Fay, and Roy Harper had a sort of baby. This is a recent reissue. It was reissued last year on Earth Records. I had no idea about this record until fairly recently. It's really, really amazing. It's got a real Nick Cave kind of vibe. Nick Drake kind of vibe. Elephantasia from 1972. And what else did I? And obviously Duncan Browne. Very little talked about. Duncan Browne, Give Me Take You. A wonderful singer-songwriter who plays on still non-string guitar, and the songs are somewhere in between English folk and psychedelic pop. They sort of live in a sort of universe. It's kind of like the halfway mark between the Zombies and someone like Nick Drake. Like, it's really is Give Me Take You from 1968 or 69 or something. Very, very important. Right. I'll move on to next category, which is progressive folk, in which I have a few really important records. So progressive folk, I got to start with the great unsung, hats off to Roy Harper, Mr. Roy Harper. Absolutely phenomenal. And if I'm going to recommend you a record, Stormcock is it. However, it's I've had this record for 20 years because it's the first record that I ordered as I started living in this house, and I've lived in this house for 20 years. I remember clear as day. I ordered from a local record store, and it was still cheap back then. And it's a beautiful original pressing on Harvest EMI, and it is an absolute masterpiece. This record. It's 2 long songs. 4 long songs. I don't know why I remembered it as two suites of songs. Anyway, 1970, just, he goes through, descends into wild progressions, and it just is such a challenging but very, very fulfilling listen. Valentine is lovely. I listened to it this afternoon actually, from 1974 or something. This is a really interesting record, Flat Baroque and Berserk, which came out in also 71 or something. No, not. It was just before. I think it was just before Stormcock, so it's 1970. Yeah. And they're just like acoustic guitar kind of ditties, but it sort of really works. And at the end, there's this crazy song called Hell's Angels, which is clearly psychedelic, but with that. Okay, I'll move on to. Okay, well, I have to mention Traffic, and I could do a whole video on Island Records, but this record with the title track "Joan Barleycorn Must Die" is, it fits. To me, it fits in this. Traffic is probably my favorite English rock band of the 70s. It really is, and I just feel that it's not a folk record per se, but and look, there we go. Over years between the 1900s and 1910s, Cecil Sharp collected a number of songs. There you go, Cecil Sharp appears again. Wonderful, wonderful record. Steve Winwood, what can I say? The man can't do any wrong. This band, Jethro Tull, their first few records, that's a real British folk rock record. I mean, in part, not all of it is. Some of it is very progressive psychedelic, but if you listen to, things like Nothing Is Easy or We Used to Know, it's clearly folk rock, stand up. To me, their greatest record. Just to think that in 1969, the Enemy voted this the best album of 1969, a year where something like Abbey Road came out. I mean, it must mean something, at least. This very little talked about record, Jan Dukes the Grey, Mice and Rats in the Loft. Really wild kind of psychedelic folk with trumpets and trombones and clarinets. Ahoy, Sun Symphonica, which is the first song there. I very highly recommend that you take a listen to. There's even sirens going. This is a wild record, but nobody talks about it, and it's very, very progressive, psychedelic, but it's got its roots in folk. And the wonderful Third Ear Band, which just sort of introduced the world to kind of ethno-world fusion, new agey folk rock, but no lyrics, basically just them. And how this is Macbeth, how medieval, how fitting for what we're talking about. And my last section, there is an end to this, is a section I'm going to call Outliers. So it's 4 or 5 really nice records that I've not mentioned before, and sort of don't fit anywhere specifically. In the progressive folk, I forgot to talk about Mellow Candle, Irish band, to these two chicks who just run the show there are just spellbinding. It's a record that is a very expensive record to buy as an original. It's like a $5,000 record or something. But if you listen to Heaven Have, or The Poet and the Witch specifically, I think it's Claudia Simmons, and Alison Williams, the two chicks on this who sing. They're amazing. Anyway, Outliers, I was saying. I can't make a video like this without talking about Vashti, because she's basically one of the first artists mentioned in the book. One of the first chapters is dedicated entirely to her, because a story kind of embodies the whole idea of British folk rock. Now everybody knows this record, which is just such a cult kind of just another Diamond Day, which I could have bought the reissue on vinyl, but I don't see the point. This sounds really wonderfully done, and it's the first reissue they ever did on CD. I just love everything on this. It's so delicate and inspired such a big wave of revival in the 2000s. The Vander Banhart and John Newsom and the like, they all sort of took a leaf out of this record. And the story of her traveling in a caravan, with her partner, husband, and going to the Hebrides, and life was hard. I mean, if you read the book, it seems really, really complex. But this record is wonderful. But nobody ever talks about Look Aftering. Look Aftering is just as good, really, in so many ways. She teamed up with Devendra Banhart, John Newsom, the Animal Collective, and made these comeback records like some 30 years later. Sounds exactly the same as she sounded there. I actually saw her once on stage as part of the Nick Drake tribute show, and she sang one or two songs, and she was just bewitching. She was beguiling to watch. She just had this like white hair, and she sounded exactly like she sounds on the record. Terry Reid needs to be mentioned. The man who would not be Led Zeppelin's lead singer. Wonderful, wonderful folk soul records, folk funk records. 1973 River, absolutely, to me essential. And a couple more, and then I'll finish this video. And Briggs, The Time Has Come. Again, she was, I think for a while she was Jansch's girlfriend or something like that, or they hung out together, or they lived together, and there's a lot of collaboration and cross-pollination there. She sings Wishing Well on this, she was just a beautiful, strikingly beautiful lady who was just a real outlier. Was not after a big career in music, was there to just make a mark and just fade away into the that's a wonderful record. And the last one is an American singer-songwriter, but made in England, Jackson C. Frank, produced by Paul Simon. Blues Run the Game, obviously, he was Sandy Denny's boyfriend for a while, and this record is just a great compendium of that sort of sound. So I'll stop here because I've been talking for too long. There's so many records I didn't even talk about. Look, that. But I could go on and on. I've got more. So I hope that you enjoy this video. If it's too long, don't watch it. I mean, obviously you wouldn't have come to this point if it was too long. Or watch it in bits. Love you all. Merry Christmas. Happy New Year. All the rest. And see you next year, probably.